Hi, I'm James Shillinglaw for Insider Travel Report, and I'm here today with Violet Manners Garnick, founder, curator, and leader of Heritage Explores Immersive Tours to the UK's Castles and Estates. That's a long title, and in fact, I'm missing one title because she's also Viscountess Violet Manners Garnick. She was born in a castle. And we're going to talk to her about her company and what it does and what it can do for your clients. And it sounds fascinating. And we're going to find out about that and more on Insider Travel Report. Violet, great to meet you. How are you doing?
Thank you, James, so much for that introduction and for having me. I'm thrilled to be with you.
Well, let's
Thank you.
talk a little bit about when did you start Heritage Explore?
So the business technically begun in 2022 in my mind, but the wheels were sort of firmly put into motion in sort of spring of 2023. Um, and we launched the business in May 24. So
Oh,
it's
well.
been a it's been a long time coming in some respects, but as lots of your viewers, listeners will know, these things don't happen overnight. It takes a lot of hard work and finding the right people to sort of help you build the vision. But I had the idea as early as 2022. So it's no, we're really excited. We're 2 years in. We'll be 2 years in May this year, which is very exciting.
Fantastic. And what the main business is, you offer tours and possible stays at historic castles and kind of great houses around the UK, correct?
Correct. I mean, I think the kind of key distinction, James, with the houses that we work with at Heritage Explorers, that all of our member houses, and we've got approximately sort of 60. I mean, we're constantly onboarding more houses to
Mhm.
Heritage Explore. There are approximately 500 independent historic houses in the United Kingdom. And that distinction of independent is very important because in the United Kingdom, there are about 800 to 1,000 historic houses of note. And 200 of them belong to a charity over here.
Right.
And that charity doesn't do any overnight stays. It doesn't have families still living within the buildings themselves. It's run by a kind of a public body, a public charity, which is called the National Trust. And then Heritage Explore exists to sort of fill that gap because I recognized in 2022 that much like the castle that I grew up in called Belvoir Castle, spelt Belvoir,
Yeah,
not
I
to be
know. I did a double take on that one because it you pronounce it beaver, but it's spelled Belvoir.
Belvoir, exactly, meaning beautiful view,
Yeah.
which makes reference to the extraordinary site that Belvoir sits on, in the heart of England. But anyway, Heritage Explore was really born out of a desire to draw people's attention, but also crucially draw people to the independent historic houses in the
Right.
UK, and to do so in the form of these hyper curated tours. It's like uh, all of these houses, James, are still lived in by the family, still lived in by, like my parents, the Duke and Duchess of Rutland. And so it is a family home. You can't just sort of turn up with your suitcase and say, "Hi, I'd like to check in."
You can't
It
you can't
does.
just walk into their living room and start watching TV with them, right?
Unfortunately not. So it requires an intermediary like myself and my business to actually ensure that, if you should want to go and experience what it really means to be a witness to and a part of independent heritage in the 21st century, you kind of have to book on to one of a few of our tours that we have as an option,
Right.
because they're not open for business and stays, like a hotel is sort of 365 days of the year. Um, but I could see in 2022 the early seeds of interest for staying in historic houses and experiencing them firsthand and meeting the families and learning about these places through the sort of familial history that's passed down from generation to generation. I could see that there was an interest there, but it wasn't yet something that was actually being, there was no tour like the ones that we produce, and there still isn't. We really are kind of one of a kind as it relates to the kind of level and quality of experience that we offer. And dare I say, the access to the owners as well, who play a big part in it.
Absolutely. Well, you have the connections for that, and do you do your own castle?
We do, we do. So one of our tours, which is happening this April, we've actually now sold that one out, but it's happening again next year. That does incorporate Beaver, which is a lot of fun because, it's a joy to see and witness your home through other people's eyes because
Mhm.
it kind of it almost every single time I watch people sort of, with their jaws slightly aghast at the Henry VIII painting that's one of three in the world, or or whatever it might be that sort of grabs people's attention from Beaver. It really makes me appreciate even more kind of where I've come from and where I've been lucky enough to call home, really.
Well, you lived there, you got married there, and
I
you
did.
and I believe it's a stand-in for Windsor Castle on the Netflix The Crown, right?
Yes, and that's because the you'll notice, or again, viewers, listeners will notice if you Google Beaver, you'll notice that the round tower was a famous kind of architectural mark left by James Wyatt, who was Beaver's architect, and indeed the same architect as Windsor Castle. So, he essentially sort of copy and pasted, his architectural mark that he left on Windsor on Beaver. And hence why, very cleverly, the location scouts at Netflix obviously you'd recognized that sort of similarity and thought to use Beaver as the replica for Windsor in all of the Crown series, which was a huge, huge
Oh, it's been a
kudos.
huge hit, and Britain keeps producing these huge hits involving royals and castles and family histories, and it doesn't. There seems to be no end of them in the end. And all featuring great houses and castles, right?
I know, and it's really interesting, James, because that for me was such a sort of a seed of inspiration as well as to why I thought this was the time to build Heritage Explore, because nothing has been created like Heritage Explore in the sector of heritage in the United Kingdom since the 70s. I mean, the National Trust was created in 1884. That was the last time that sort of, platforms or places, online places of our ilk were created, which is kind of that's a long time ago. So I think, for me, witnessing and watching the world of, TV, movies, podcasts, all of a sudden just become obsessed with period dramas
Mm.
again. For me, that felt like a huge kind of catalyst, really, for why I felt as though, in 2022, why I had the idea. And I do sort of mildly credit Netflix, Amazon, Disney, and others for they've created this resurgence for sure
No,
in our
absolutely.
historic properties.
And I have, the same deal. We all want to live in a castle or a great house. You are the person who was lucky enough to be and live in one. Although I understand they can be a bit drafty and cold, but that's
They definitely can. Beaver, luckily, is not that because we actually, rather amazingly, Beaver is now heated in this sort of fully circular way. So any of the sort of redundant wood from the estate, and lots of houses on our platform that we work with use redundant wood from their estate. It goes into a wood chip burner.
okay.
And it's then used to heat up the castles because, as you can imagine, heating up a castle in 2026 is a rather expensive endeavor. Um,
Especially these days. Yeah.
exactly. So, there's quite kind of clever ways that historic houses have ensured that actually they've created this really green, really ethical, eco-friendly kind of way of heating their homes. And Beaver is forever being charged with being too hot, not too cold. But you are right, there are plenty of places that are freezing that we work with as well.
Yeah. Now, how many total properties do you have access to now? I know you're probably looking for more,
Mm.
but and how many times a year do you actually conduct these tours of these castles and great houses?
Yeah. So we approximately have about 60 houses on the platform now that we work with. We probably work with about 30 of them for the tours specifically. Um, And at the moment, we host 3 tours annually.
Okay.
And we tend to sort of anchor the tours around, very sort of topical current cultural events that are already happening in the United Kingdom. So, as an example, our May tour commences shortly after the Chelsea Flower Show, which is
Okay.
obviously, world famous. Um, Likewise, our Scottish tour commences before the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which
Oh,
again
a
is
wonderful time. Yeah.
an amazing time. So that's in August. We have a tour in May. We have another tour in April. And next year we're going to aim to do approximately the same. We might add one additional tour because we have seen a huge amount of interest to do so this year. Um, but it's not, as I mentioned, because these places are home still, it requires a huge amount of coordination, as you might imagine, to ensure that we select times of the year that are good for visitors or good
Right.
for guests that want to come on the tour, but also work well with the houses. And, this isn't something that happens every week. So we kind of intend to keep the supply of tours relatively limited, but ensure that we hopefully meet like kind of key markers in the year when
Got
we
it.
know people would like to come,
Can you,
basically.
aside from the tours, can you also separately arrange stays? In the-
Stays, in theory, yes, but in reality, it's very difficult because
Okay.
again, they're not hotels, these houses, and they don't have the setup that would suggest, they are. So, really, for a historic house to open its doors for a single couple, that's a big cost.
Right.
So actually, the beauty of the product that we've created in the form of these tours is that you can effectively experience these historic houses and the beautiful black tie dinners in the evening with cocktails and drinks receptions, and you can experience all of that for, when actually it's incredibly difficult to do that
Got it.
outside of our tours, basically. I mean, it's virtually unheard of that you'd be able to sort of go up to Holcombe Hall and say, "Hi, we'd like to, stay for the night." It's just not, that is just not a thing.
And I have been to Holcombe Hall, so I know what you're talking about. But it's
Yeah,
although you always say, when you go on these tours, you say, "Wow, I'd love to stay here someday," but
I
not
know.
always possible. Now you
Um,
were married last year. Congratulations to William
Thank you so
Garnick,
much.
who's a
Mhm.
Scottish nobleman who is the founder of I can't Faragaya.
Ferragaya. Yeah.
Faragaya, which I did a little double take on this. It's Scotland's pioneering distilled alcohol-free spirit. Have you tried to work with him to combine your interests?
Yeah, but funny enough, you're right. He built Scotland's first non-alcoholic distillery, and I know that might sort of shock and awe some people listening or
Especially
watching.
since he's from Scotland.
I know, and he's a big whiskey drinker. He loves his whiskey. He's passionate about whiskey, but he built a business that actually uses all the same techniques
Right.
um as that, as that's used to create whiskey, i.e., it goes through a big distillation process, but in fact they don't cut the botanicals that are used
Ah,
with alcohol, they cut it with water.
got it.
And good Scottish water. So it is a non-alcoholic alternative, and it's incredible. It's been going for 7 years. It was Scotland's first non-alcoholic distillery. And he's all over New York. I mean, if you go to any of the Nobu restaurants, if you go
Oh,
to
really?
any,
I do that a lot, so I know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think I'm right in saying New York's his second biggest market in America outside of Texas. And he's in hundreds of restaurants. So if you look at most cocktail menus, his Ferragamo cocktails are sort of very often at the top. He's across all the Hilton hotels in the US, um, and on all the menus at Hilton hotels. So it's doing really well. And he studied at Alabama and then subsequently lived in San Antonio, Texas for sort of 10 years on and off. So he really, in his mind and his heart, America is his second home. Which is really wonderful, and I love learning more about America through him every time we go. It's just the best.
Although I have to tell you that there's something about sitting around a roaring fire in a castle drinking non-alcoholic water Uh, I'm sorry. I think I'll have a single malt with him, but I don't know about that.
I know. It's not definitely not meant to replace a whiskey. It's meant to be the drink that you drink in between sort of
Yeah,
whiskey three and
it's
whiskey four. Just to
whiskey
give you
with a little
four.
glass of water in it. I know that's the other way to drink it.
Exactly, exactly.
I got it. It sounds like a
Um,
fascinating business, and you said he's working on that one. And you've also you sort of your mother Emma, who is
mm,
you as you mentioned is the Duchess of Rutland, founded Duchess, which is a podcast about heritage, and Duchess actually explores independent historic houses through the women who live there. Has this helped you market Heritage Explore?
it has. And actually, that podcast, we created that podcast in 2020. We had 2.5 million people tune into the podcast. 40% of our audience is in the US. It was a roaring success. And it definitely shone a light for me on how how much interest there is in these independent historic houses globally and
Right.
how they weren't capitalizing on it because and I mean this with the greatest of respects to all of the houses that we work with and hopefully will continue to and all the others, but actually they don't have the bandwidth, frankly, James, to sort of to do what we are now doing for and with them. They don't have the bandwidth to be creating the kind of tours that we're discussing and describing. They don't, because estates are such huge daily kind of ongoing enormous amounts of work. And actually, they're so all-consuming. Sometimes it's very difficult to sort of get your head above the parapet and actually look out at the wider world and say, okay, what does actually everyone want from us? And that's sort of where Heritage Explore really comes in for our estates that we work with. We kind of act as that. I hope that, they all see us very much as a sort of frontier platform promoting them and celebrating them and ultimately drawing people to their homes. That's our goal, and that's why houses work with us to do what we do.
Now you mentioned that you have a tour coming up. Is you have usually what three tours a year?
Mhm.
Um, just describe for us the elements of this tour, how long it is, what you do, because obviously you can't stay in the castle or the Great House the whole time. But
No.
what do you
Um,
do? What do you do during this tour, and what do you visit?
So during the tour, obviously everyone arrives at slightly different times, but some of our guests are arriving in time for the Friday, which is the penultimate day of Chelsea Flower Show.
Right.
So actually, some of our guests were giving this kind of VIP tour of Chelsea Flower Show with one of the trustees, which is really exciting. And then everyone is invited to hop into a Grenadier Ineos car, which is our car partner for the trip and for the tour. So everyone's given a chauffeur-driven car for the duration of the trip. And then they're chauffeured up to our first house, which is Euston, which is the home of the Duke and Duchess of Grafton.
Hmm.
There are only 27 dukes, James, in the United Kingdom. So my father is one of them. The Duke and Duchess of Grafton are a second. But as my father would say, they're a dying breed. So when you get to meet or spend time with a duke, it's actually slightly rarer than perhaps one might think.
Right.
So we take everyone straight up to Euston. And we'll have a wonderful evening at Euston. We'll arrive in the afternoon, have an afternoon tea, and then enjoy a beautiful sort of black tie dinner with the Duke and Duchess. There is a sort of exciting and secret performance that's happening within the hall at Euston just before dinner. And the dinners tend to, take the form of, we'll do a lovely drinks reception, followed by a dinner in the state dining room, and then very often afterwards there is a single malt that's served, around the fireplace.
Okay.
Um, and then really the trip kind of unravels in a similar kind of tone. Every day you are effectively driven as a group, obviously, but all in your own vehicles. You're driven to a historic house. We're lucky enough to enjoy a tour with the owners of that historic house. And then we enjoy lunch with them if we're just there for the day. And then we'll head off on to the next house and enjoy a second tour in the afternoon. before heading back to Euston for a second evening, where again, everyone has plenty of time to sort of rest, relax, go around the grounds of Euston because the gardens are really beautiful there. And then before, getting dressed up again for a second night, and heading through to the state dining room for a second dinner. Um, and again, there is a sort of a surprise performance that's lined up for that in the drawing room. And then the same happens again the following day, but obviously completely different houses we're
Right.
taking it to. And then we finish, well, this third night is at another historic house called Sono Hall, which again was very recently actually featured in the World of Interiors, for its extraordinary interiors and its recent restoration of those interiors.
Mhm.
So I think I'm right in saying our guests will be some of the first to stay in it since the recent renovations were
Okay.
complete. And then we'll enjoy an evening there with Virginia and Charlie, who are the owners, the incumbent owners of Snow. And we finish with a tour of Wolterton Hall, which was Walpole, who is a huge sort of historical figure in the UK,
Right.
uh, of his historic house in Norfolk. And then we'll head on to Holcombe Hall and do the same there. And I'm thrilled to say that Lady Anne Glenconnor is also joining us when we visit Holcombe. And she grew up at Holcombe Hall. She was a lady in waiting to the late Queen. And she's just phenomenal. She's a great friend of mine. And she's just quite a tour de force. So she'll be with us to give us sort of, her own version of what it was like growing up at Holcombe, which will be fascinating to hear.
Well, it sounds like an incredible experience with all these great homes and to meet actual dukes and duchesses and ladies in waiting. It's something absolutely it's something in demand over here, as we talked about earlier. Now,
Yeah.
um, we go out to a lot of different travel advisors, many of whom sell very upscale travel. Um, how can they work with you to, to get in on some of their clients, because you're obviously your group size is somewhat limited. Um,
Yes, they are intentionally limited because we want to ensure that everyone really feels like they have a seat at the table, and it's not a crowded table that they're sitting at. It's a comfortable table and everyone gets a chance to meet and speak with the incumbent owners and I think what's really, really wonderful, to witness, James, on these kind of tours for me is that group size is quite important because people arrive as strangers and they leave as friends. And I
right,
saw that, over and over again last year with the tours that we hosted. And that's such an important thing, I believe, in this day and age, to find people with like-minded interests and actually, walk away with new friends at whatever age. That's a gift. And I'm so thrilled that we get to be a part of that sort of, that journey. But the way in which we tend to love working with agents and travel specialists is really obviously working on commission, and hopefully as well very often we've worked with travel agents who have said to us, listen, we have a guest who would like to take the tour in its entirety with a group of friends.
right.
We've got two of those happening actually next year. So whilst we're only sort of publicizing three tours, we are in fact already
Mm,
hosting five because we are essentially creating two additional tours for two individuals who have wanted to take it with their own friends. Um, so I think we have to work obviously on commission. I recognize the challenge. A lot of travel agents have said to me, they obviously tend to work with bespoke travel, bespoke
right,
dates. And I know that that's something that can frustrate travel agents about the Heritage Explore Lux tours because the dates are set fundamentally. But it's really important to understand the product, and the product is so unique. It is so rare. You are staying in the bedrooms of the historic house owners and their guest bedrooms effectively. I mean, and they are staggeringly beautiful. They're state bedrooms. I'll make sure I send you some pictures to feature. But it means that, I definitely understand and have discussed at length the sort of frustration at times from agents saying, but we only specialize in bespoke travel, and the fear that they might have around promoting a tour like this to people that are used to receiving bespoke travel offers. But all I will say is that I've seen firsthand, we've got some extraordinary, very well known and recognized Americans coming on the tour in May this year. They haven't batted an eyelid about being on a trip with people they
Well,
don't know.
they're
They're
also with
excited by it.
their peers, the people who are interested in this and have the money to do this. So
Yeah.
it's a different kind of traveler,
Mm.
and clearly there is enormous interest, and this is a sort of a privilege and an experience that you can't get anywhere else.
No, exactly that. Exactly that.
Yeah. So where if they want to get in touch with you, I think your email
Yes.
is Violet at
Violet.
Heritage Explorer with an X.com.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly that.
And then
Exactly that.
the site is www.heritagex as an explore.com, right?
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly
Fantastic.
that.
Thank you. Well, Violet, I want to thank you for filling us in. I mean, I love this kind of trip in England. I've been fortunate to do a few castles in my time, and
Mm.
meet some families who live in the castles. Um, I even met Prince Philip once, but that was another story.
Oh, wow. I want to hear that
In Windsor
story.
Castle, well, I'll tell you that story another time, but that was many years ago.
How
And I
amazing.
did
Lucky
speak
you.
with him along with the other group. So, but I've met a few others, and it is an amazing time, especially to see these wonderful, castles and great houses that really, it's great when they're lived in a way.
Yeah.
They're not just, museums or ruins or something you climb. When I was a kid, I used to like to go to any castle. That was my I could have to had to put a castle in the tour.
Yeah.
That's how they managed to get to the art museums. So that was it. But anyway, listen, Violet, I want to thank you again. And if you want to get in touch with Violet, we gave you the information and it's below. I'm sure you have some clients that would be fascinated with these tours. Again, thank you so much, Violet.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really, really wonderful to chat with you more about what we've got planned for this year and next.
I'm James Shellinglaw, and this is Insider Travel Report.